The silence of this side, then, should not be mistaken for acquiescence or agreement with the triumph of the opposing perspective. It is a silence born of weariness, not resolution, and it serves as a reminder of the unfulfilled potential of science. The boredom and indifference that have taken root are not final. They can be overcome through a reinvigoration of purpose and a renewed commitment to the demands that remain unmet. This requires not only addressing the shortcomings of the current state of science, but also fostering a broader understanding of the interplay between immediacy and comprehensibility, between the depth of rational insight and the richness of articulated detail. By recognizing the legitimacy of these demands and the reasons for their persistent unfulfillment, science can begin to bridge the divide between the opposing sides. This process will require patience, persistence, and the willingness to confront the frustrations and disappointments of the past. But it is only through this effort that the potential of science can be fully realized, satisfying both the demand for universal accessibility and the aspiration for profound rational insight. Regarding content, some approach their task in a way that makes it relatively easy to achieve the appearance of accomplishment, occasionally boasting of a great breadth of material as evidence of their intellectual mastery. They draw into their domain an extensive array of materials, relying heavily on what is already known, categorized, and ordered within the established fields of knowledge. This appropriation of pre-existing content lends their work an air of comprehensiveness, as though they have encompassed a vast intellectual territory and integrated it into their perspective. Their focus, however, often gravitates toward peculiarities and curiosities, those elements of knowledge that, while intriguing, are not central to the core development of their subject. By concentrating on these marginal details, they give the impression of meticulousness and breadth, as though they have left no stone unturned. In doing so, they appear to command the rest of what knowledge in their domain has already achieved, positioning themselves as the inheritors and organizers of its totality. At the same time, they present themselves as masters of what remains unorganized, those aspects of knowledge that have not yet been systematically integrated into a coherent whole. By extending their efforts to these unstructured areas, they claim to subject even the unordered and fragmented elements of thought to the absolute idea. This gesture gives the impression that the absolute has been recognized in all things, as if every fragment of knowledge, whether ordered or chaotic, has been drawn into the light of a universal principle. The result is an appearance of an expansive science, one in which the absolute idea seems to have developed fully, encompassing the breadth of human knowledge and ordering it into a unified system. This presentation suggests that every aspect of reality has been subjected to the scrutiny of the absolute, that no domain has been left untouched by its reach. The breadth of material, combined with the assertion of systematic integration, lends an air of finality and completeness to their work. Yet this approach, while impressive in its scope, raises critical questions about the depth and authenticity of its achievements. The reliance on pre-existing knowledge and the focus on peculiarities may obscure the absence of genuine development or originality. The apparent mastery of unorganized material may mask a superficial application of the absolute idea, one that imposes a semblance of order without truly penetrating the essence of the content. The expansive science that results may be broad, but it risks being shallow, lacking the rigorous internal development that characterizes true systematic thought. To truly subject everything to the absolute idea requires more than a mere assertion of its presence in all things. It demands the labor of thought, the process of unfolding and articulating the absolute in a way that reveals its inner necessity and coherence within the diversity of material. This task is far more demanding than the aggregation of pre-existing knowledge or the imposition of superficial order. It requires the integration of breadth and depth, ensuring that the absolute idea is not merely applied, but genuinely realized in the content it engages. Thus, while the approach of appropriating and ordering vast arrays of material may produce the appearance of a comprehensive science, it remains insufficient if it does not engage in the deeper work of development. The absolute idea cannot simply appear to be present in all things. It must be shown to unfold and articulate itself within them, demonstrating its necessity and universality. Without this genuine development, the expansive science risks becoming an illusion of completeness, one that satisfies the demand for breadth, but fails to achieve the depth required for true knowledge. Upon closer examination, however, the much vaunted breadth of such work reveals itself as less impressive than it initially appears. It is not the product of a single principle genuinely manifesting itself in diverse and dynamic forms, unfolding its essence through a coherent and necessary process. Instead, it becomes evident that this breadth is little more than a shapeless repetition of the same formula, applied externally and indiscriminately to various materials. What is presented as richness and diversity is in reality a monotonous proliferation of the same underlying framework, mechanically imposed on different content, without undergoing any substantive transformation or development. This approach creates the tedious illusion of diversity, as though the variety of material reflects the internal dynamism of a principle coming into its own. In truth, this repetition merely disguises the lack of genuine movement or creativity. The same formula is reproduced over and over, resulting in a superficial semblance of progress that fails to engage with the depth and complexity of the subject matter. The principle at play, though perhaps true in itself, remains static and undeveloped, confined to the narrow scope of its initial articulation. The perpetual repetition of the same idea, applied without differentiation or deeper integration, undermines its potential for genuine development. Rather than evolving and expanding through the dialectical movement of its own necessity, the idea stagnates, always returning to its starting point. Its engagement with diverse material does not lead to the enrichment of the principle or the unveiling of new dimensions of its truth. Instead, the principle remains trapped in a circular pattern, endlessly reiterating itself without advancing toward a fuller or more concrete realization. This lack of development is not merely an aesthetic or procedural failing, but a fundamental limitation. A principle that does not unfold itself in response to the diversity of material cannot claim to be truly universal or comprehensive. Its inability to generate new forms from its own inner logic reveals its insufficiency, reducing its application to a mechanical exercise rather than a living, self-realizing process. The result is a kind of intellectual sterility, where the promise of the idea's potential remains unfulfilled, its richness and depth obscured by the tedium of its repetitive application. The failure to develop beyond this repetition leaves the idea perpetually at its beginning. It does not progress toward greater articulation or complexity, but remains stuck in its most rudimentary form. This stagnation diminishes the power and scope of the idea, rendering it incapable of addressing the full breadth of reality or engaging with the deeper contradictions and tensions that drive genuine thought. The principle, though true in itself, becomes lifeless when reduced to such mechanical reiteration, losing its capacity to illuminate the richness and complexity of the material it seeks to encompass. True breadth, by contrast, arises from the active unfolding of a principle through the diversity of forms and content, where each moment of its development reveals a new aspect of its truth. This process is not a simple repetition of the same, but a dynamic progression in which the idea transforms and enriches itself, integrating the particularities of material into the unity of its concept. In this movement, the idea does not remain at its beginning, but advances toward a comprehensive realization, demonstrating its universality and necessity. The challenge, then, is to move beyond the illusion of diversity created by repetition and to embrace the labor of genuine development. This requires a willingness to engage with the material not as an external domain to be subsumed under a static formula, but as an integral part of the principle's self-realization. Only through this dialectical process can the idea fulfill its potential, breaking free from the confines of repetition and achieving the dynamic richness that defines true science.